My name's Maria Rusche. I'm a cinematographer. I'm based in New York. Mostly I work on narrative projects. I do a lot of features. So I shot a movie called Bottoms. It's about two queer high school girls who start a fight club to try to hook up with cheerleaders. So I met Emma Seligman, the director, on a movie we did called Shiva Baby. We really hit it off. I had known Rachel Sennett, who's in that movie. We all went to NYU. I had heard about this kind of high school movie that Emma and Rachel were writing together during Shiva, and it was just this kind of bonkers, satirical, over-the-top high school comedy that felt very much in Rachel's comedic voice, but combined with Emma's ability to write more grounded relationships and things like that. When Emma and I first started working on references and kind of going through inspiration, tone for the project, we initially started looking at a lot of high school movies like classics, Grease, 10 Things I Hate About You. We were looking for kind of what are the genre elements that we're gonna need to hit if we're referencing high school movies, and that kind of evolved into things with a little more satire, like Bring It On, or even like A Jennifer's Body. Visually, we realized with the Fight Club of it all, what we really wanted was to give our girls this kind of hero story. You know, we talked inevitably a lot about like the high school movies that were funny for our generation growing up, like a Superbad or something that was just totally defining of what was funny at that time. And it was just so, boys can be kind of crass and gross, and that like was humor. In 2007, as we started going through high school movies, we realized all the things we kind of felt we missed out on in those movies and things we kind of never felt like we saw. That brought us to like more superhero movies. We looked at Kick-Ass and Kill Bill and Fight Club, obviously, and our core visual tenets kind of got boiled down to giving a visual arc to the girls' story by like showing them as strong characters as the movie goes on. And for us, that was a lot of push-ins for punctuating an important beat or like a story moment, and shooting the girls from a little bit of a lower angle as the story went on. You know, we started with the football boys getting that sort of treatment. You know, we're looking up at them a little bit more. All these choices, we're thinking like, how is this gonna have an emotional impact that's gonna enhance your understanding of the story or understanding of the characters in some way? You know, I really try not to like over-intellectualize a lot of those choices, because I just find when I'm watching something, it's the emotional experience of it that's really affecting me. So the kind of superhero scope was really important to us, because the satire is so over the top that if you shot it too grounded, like if it really just kind of looked too realistic, that it would make the tone a little confusing.
Get out of the car.
You can't tell me what to do!
Get out of the freaking car!
We shot list pretty intensely. Part of my process with Emma is going through each scene and kind of breaking it down together, and the blocking and the location are immensely important in how the scene is going to present. And so we work a lot at how to block the scene in a way that we're able to get, for example, in the cafeteria, when we were talking about where would Jeff and his kind of cronies be sitting, Emma had this idea of having them kind of like at a straight table. And we were like, yeah, I guess everybody else would be at round tables, but she kind of kept referencing that they'd be in a line basically at a table, because Isabel needed to like walk straight up to him and give him a hard time. I was like, you know, like the Last Supper vibes. I mean, it was an example of like, where can we then situate this table that adds the most like effect to the scene. You know, we want them to be centered somewhere, and then what's gonna be behind them, like that's the perfect spot for this mural, this kind of monument to Jeff's greatness. It's hard to describe because it's not like one thing kind of happens first and then another thing happens. It feels very much like an equation that every piece like affects the other. So, you know, when I'm thinking about blocking, I'm also thinking, well, how are they positioned in relation to motivating light sources and where we could place the camera? It's kind of where we start when we like break down each scene. We shot on the Alexa Mini LF. I've shot basically every movie I've done on some version of an Alexa. Cameras are, I think of as a tool, and I've gotten really used to how that camera system captures skin tones and captures color, and it's my first time shooting large format. It felt like the right choice for us because the scope was really meant to make the stakes of the world higher. You know, it's like they're in high school, but to them it's life or death, and so the large format helped us kind of capture that. We kind of pretty quickly realized we wanted to shoot anamorphic because it does feel like it's a piece of visual language that really instantly clues the audience into the tone a little bit, and not just the widescreen aspect ratio, but you know, a little bit of warping around the edges and the streaking flares and things like that. I do think it evokes this kind of emotional reaction in the audience of like, something's really going down, like the action is happening. It felt really fresh to us to shoot an environment that is constructed to be more like a John Hughes world with this kind of epic action scope. When we decided we were gonna shoot anamorphic, we tested a number of lenses. Part of what we were looking for is what's the distortion looking like across the set? How different are each of the lenses? We didn't want a ton of crazy character just because it did feel like it would be a little bit distracting for this project. We knew we'd have a ton of ensemble blocking and we'd really be using the width of the frame. And so we wanted to really see how that would be distorting like people on the edges of the frame and things like that. So we did a bit of testing with Panavision in New Orleans where we shot. I've done every movie I've shot with Panavision, and it's really helpful to have support like that where you can go in and kind of say like, this is kind of what I'm looking for. What do you guys have? Do you have any ideas? And they had the idea of the Atlas Orion series when I had been describing kind of not too much distortion and like that we wanted to feel kind of timeless and classic. They showed us these lenses and they felt really perfect for us because the distortion was pretty consistent across the focal lengths. We knew we'd be using the like breadth of the lenses also because sometimes, again, in anamorphic sets, the focal lengths can differ so much in their look, and sometimes the wider focal lengths can just really look a bit distracting. And so this sort of modern look of these lenses was really kind of perfect for us. We're looking for these specific visual details in the lenses, but we're also sitting in a theater projecting these tests and just like wondering if it feels like our movie. I think at that point in prep, once we're testing lenses, we've done quite a bit of reference pulling, and we really kind of know our look at that point. And so I think that yes, we're looking at a lot of technical details, but we're also looking for an emotional reaction. And I think we got that from the Atlas Orion series. Once we decided on the Atlas Orion series, one thing we kind of wanted to adjust about them was making them feel slightly softer and giving them slightly more focus fall off around the edges because we're shooting digital, so there's like a little bit of inherent sharpness there, and we felt detuning would be a great way to take a little bit of that edge off. It made a huge difference. I'm super happy with how they turned out because I think you can really see the focus is a little bit softer around the edges. It just kind of like enhances, again, that like feeling of scope and like lightly focusing your attention towards the center of the frame, and the slightly lower contrast also, I think, helped it feel a little bit more in line with a 10 Things I Hate About You or something like that. I was using the like 40 and 50 a lot for push-ins or like moments of exaggeration, but I felt really confident using all of the focal lengths for what kind of effect was needed. And we carried a B camera the whole time too, so that was really huge to be able to have two sizes on one angle and not be worried about them like just not really matching and being kind of like jarring when you're trying to cut between those two shots. We shot bottoms in New Orleans for 27 days, which felt very short at the time, especially considering we had a number of fight sequences and explosions. The fight sequences were challenging partially because the final sequence takes place on a huge football field. We had to plan for a number of extras, or in some cases like visual effects to extend the crowd. It's a lot of like moving pieces for a scene like that with so much of the cast and shooting overnights for a week straight. I think the biggest challenge was just timing and having such limited time. So, a way I really try to prep for that is having kind of these photo boards that break down, this is the frame that we're gonna be using. For the fight sequences, I've shot all the previs video, so I was able to shoot the exact kind of framing and lenses we'd be using, and got our editor, Hannah Park, to cut that together. That's largely exactly what we shot. So, I put into a document and try to disseminate that to as much of the crew as possible to really try to get everybody on the same page, because for a scene like that, again, with so many moving parts, we just had a ton of crew doing their best to manage everything. I think the more everybody can understand what's going on, the easier it is a little bit to pull that off, because you're trying to just move so quickly. I was really happy with my lighting team in New Orleans. They were really able to lay a lot of groundwork often because they knew, we were shooting on such a tight schedule. We were able to pre-rig most of our locations so that we'd really just walk in and have to do a little bit of shaping, but it was a huge time saver to be able to kind of really have a base for our lighting. I swear there's other scenes I can talk about, but the fight sequence is so fun. We're shooting on the Phantom as well for a couple of those shots, like Io running with Jeff over her shoulder. We kind of, had this idea for her to carry him off of the field. We just thought that it was such a funny visual to have her throw him over her shoulder. Shooting it was just so funny to see Io being so seriously running with this dummy that had been dressed in a football uniform thrown over her shoulder. It was hilarious. The other piece of that scene that was really fun to shoot was one of the last pieces we did, as you can imagine, was when all the girls get covered in blood. They get a huge spray of blood. So obviously we can't really undo that. So we got one take really of that. It was really a fun moment because it's the whole ensemble of the girls, and it kind of, I think, captures a little bit of the heart of the movie, which is you see all the girls kind of united together, looking so much like themselves, and then they just get totally insanely sprayed with blood. That kind of just visual, it feels like something we kept coming back to for different scenes in terms of how the blood would look, how kind of gory would we get, or how intense was the fighting and stuff like that. That's a shot that has a special little place in my heart. When Emma and I were designing the visual language of the movie, we knew we wanted the visual kind of presentation to enhance, the parts of the story that were not just performance-based necessarily. We knew that the visuals could do a lot also to help put you in the right space. And so as an example, every high school movie we watched has that kind of scene towards the beginning where they're introducing the new character to all of the high school tropes, here's the band geeks, here's these people. And our sort of homage to that was when they show up to the carnival and we see the two hot girls who don't give a shit about them. And we see Miette and the skaters, and we're getting a lay of the land sort of, and we're dropping in exposition about what this town is, what they value, and who the students are there, but we're doing it in a way, hopefully, that's referencing a visual style that you've seen in terms of that introduction shot being a oneer. The hope is that you watch that moment and you're kind of like immediately transported to the high school movies that do that. And that way, when the joke is that, oh, here's the gay kid, but like everybody loves him because he's so talented, the visuals actually help set up the joke. And I think Emma really understands the importance of that. And I think it's tricky to balance it with how much improvisation was in the movie, because Rachel and I are such like talented comedic actors and writers themselves. You know, we talked a lot about like why the shot was designed the way it was and like why that was important. And I think that helped us stick to our guns in terms of not letting the style go by the wayside when you're inevitably totally crunched for time when you're shooting. We designed all the coverage to be such a crucial part of conveying the message of that scene that it couldn't be cut. A lot of times what we ended up cutting was just extra coverage. I've known Rachel and Io since college. I met them before Emma, and Rachel was always wanting to shoot sketches she had written, and Io was in a few of them, and then Emma since prepping for Shiva Baby, and that was shortly after she left school. So it was interesting to see how much like we've grown together in a lot of ways in terms of being able to see the progression of their comedic voices, and we've just had conversations as people. It's hard to quantify how much that informs the style and the messaging, because we've had just other conversations about what we think of life, what we think is funny. It's really rewarding in that way to work with people you've known for a while. I think it feels really important too, because I have seen other people kind of get successful and then be forced to leave behind people that they've been working with, and it can be like an isolating experience. So having known Emma especially for a while and having worked together before, it created this environment where I really felt like I was able to be honest with her about not just my department and just with other aspects of the filmmaking process. And I think that's really rare, unfortunately, because we've created such a like hierarchical, compartmentalized way of making movies as like budgets increase and crews get bigger. Yeah, we were able to be really open and honest during the filmmaking process. I just saw in real time how much that benefited the movie, because I was able to kind of convey certain things that maybe Emma didn't have time to do, like what we needed for stunts. It's really fun working with friends that I've known for so long. I think it can be tricky because you're doing a job, so you're also having to be kind of focused and serious, and especially when you have such limited time, it can also be tricky to make sure everybody's staying focused and act professional, even though you're just talking to your pal who you've known since college. It's been really exciting to see all the love for Bottoms, because you never know how people are gonna react to a movie you've spent so long sweating and bleeding over. It's been especially exciting to see young women and queer people coming to see this movie and feel really seen by this movie, because we really made a movie that we wanted to see and the movie that we wish we had. It's exciting that that feels so moving to so many people. I think it's just a testament to how big of a need there is right now for movies for young people that are not necessarily like what we've seen before, that aren't sequels, that aren't existing IP, I guess. Yeah, it's just really exciting to see how much people want to see that. So thanks to everybody who's seen it so far.